Hey, does that music sound familiar to you? That music's called bop. And there's one large question going around that everybody seems to be asking. They all want to know one thing. What is this thing called bop? But before we start in on bop, let's go back for a minute and trace the different types of American jazz which have led to today's music. I guess it all started with a style called ragtime, which originated in the Deep South about the turn of the century. Here's a sample with Leadbelly doing the Eagle Rock Rag. Now, how'd you like that? That was jazz at its very beginning. A new baby in music, but one which grew and progressed rapidly. New Orleans was probably the first city to claim its own kind of jazz. Of course, jazz wasn't quarantined in New Orleans. It crept rapidly through the Deep South. Jazz traveled up the river from New Orleans. Jazz classics like South Rampart Street Parade. Yeah, people laughed at this new jazz music in those days, just as they laugh at bop today. They said it was just a lot of noise, that it wouldn't last, that only low-down, no-good musicians played jazz. But they were wrong. Jazz had something. It had a meaning. It had a heart. It was something new and exciting. It was here, and it was going to stay. It was the true music of America, and nothing could keep this music from traveling up the river and stopping at every city along the way, until it finally reached Chicago. And then the Windy City claimed its own kind of jazz that went something like this. Yeah, good old Chicago. New music was being born there every day. Always something new on the music horizon in the Windy City. Next, it was a thing called syncopated jazz. You remember Paul Whiteman, the king of jazz? Well, he brought showmanship to this new kind of music and wrote it down on the musical staff and rehearsed his band until they had every note down perfectly. It wasn't true jazz, but the syncopated rhythm of Paul Whiteman. Pretty soon, there were lots of bands playing this new music. Gene Goldcat, Isham Jones, the great Duke Ellington, the famous Casa Loma Orchestra, and there was another young man named Benny Goodman, who later, about 1935, was hailed king of something else new in music. Another something that people said wouldn't last. You remember, Benny was the king of swing. Yes, and swing stayed on with bands like Glenn Miller, Harry James, Charlie Barnett, Woody Herman, and, of course, Benny himself. But you know, a thing as great as music just doesn't stand still. So, there came another kind of music. Music? People said, this isn't music, this is just a lot of noise. But it came during the Second World War, and the young people of America liked it. It was noisy and exciting and discordant. It was music popularized by a young musician named Stan Kenton. Kenton and his band introduced the new progressive music. Hey, how about that? Doesn't that sound new, different, pretty exciting? Well, that's a band playing bop. Pretty well-known band, too. Benny Goodman, the same B.G. who gave swing such a lift back in 1935. So, you better get with this new style of music. It's here to stay, at least for a while, and it's going to be big. Now, what is this thing called bop? What makes it different? And how can you tell it when you hear it? After all, no matter what anyone says, it's music, and there's nothing secret or mysterious about it that you can't understand. Music is made up of three elements: melody, harmony, and rhythm. So let's start with the first of these three. Now, there you have some melody played in the bop style, which flows along for a while and then, as Dizzy says, goes bebop and then starts in again. And don't miss the unusual intervals between the notes. And watch for that rapid execution. Some of these boys play plenty of notes. Well, let's take harmony next, where the number one characteristic of bop is the use of the flatted fifth. Now, don't let this throw you. It just means that instead of using a plain chord like this one, you flat the fifth note, and it sounds like this. You see the difference? That's one reason why the endings of so many records seem sort of strange, because instead of the old simple chord, they might end like this. Okay? Well, now we go on to rhythm. And you've probably noticed that the drummer is a busy boy indeed, what with his cymbal, rim shots on the side of the drum, and bass drum beats all being very important. And also, the whole band is called on for some pretty unusual types of phrasing and fast rhythm accents which would have terrified musicians 10 years ago. Listen to this. Finally, how about bop singing? Well, here are three styles: Babs Gonzalez, Dave Lambert, and Nat King Cole, one right after the other.
Loop-a-doo-boo, poop-a-rainy, flop-pop. Loop-a-doo-boo, poop-a-rainy, flop-pop. A million billy say you, then you loop-a-blue.
You say it sounds like modern scat singing? Well, don't let them hear you say it, but you're pretty close to being right. And notice that while they use the vowels E, Ah, and Oo, they never use I or O. Don't ask me why. Well, there it is. Arrangers and named band leaders are using the style more every day. And the more you hear it, the more you'll like it. Good bop, I mean, like Benny Goodman's Undercurrent Blues. Or Woody Herman's That's Right. So, have yourself a ball. Bop is here. You better get with it.